let's get started. So here are the following topics for today. And I think we're just going to start from the top, or we can shuffle around. What do you think?
We can start from the top. That's fine.
So the first topic, continuing from last time, is getting more contributors. I've seen that you've tried to encourage people to open up pull requests for things.
Yeah, just a few places.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's a good start. And I think we could also maybe, the web component thing would be interesting to follow up on.
Yeah, I haven't, so both of us have been kind of under the weather lately. I've been sick for a week, so progress has stalled since the last meeting. But I will follow up on the Twitter thread with the web components stuff.
Yeah.
As they rightly saw, we don't use Shadow DOM at all now.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see some use cases for it, so I might experiment with adding, like, if you use, instead of write self, you write root or something inside of the render method, then it would automatically like make the content automatically move inside of a shadow root inside that component or something like that. So,
yeah, that sounds good, because then, but like, what kind of side effect does it have to change it to root?
So what do you mean?
Like, if we start supporting the Shadow DOM, are we going to see more bugs, more issues, or is it just going to work?
That depends. I think it should just work. But again, I'm not that into the whole Shadow DOM thing. I think Shadow DOM is mostly valuable for reusable components, like that are created outside of your application and reused in different apps. There it makes sense. But if you're creating a single, like, large single page application in Imba, then I don't think Shadow Root, creating custom components with a shadow root, makes a lot of sense. In some cases it might, but it's not really important.
I see. I haven't really looked that much into the Shadow DOM thing, so I'm not that familiar with it. But one thing that would be interesting with regards to web components, or the account there, is to get Imba working on webcomponents.dev. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
So that's it's like an IDE, and then you just pick your project, and there are templates for React, Svelte, and so on. And then you get the project set up, basically, so you can start experimenting and so on. I don't know how many people are actually using this, but I plan on using this a bit more. And I think it's running the Monaco editor here, if you see the line numbering.
It looks like it. Yeah.
And it supports Vim mode, so you can actually move around. Yeah, so that's why I was interested on following up on that part.
Yeah, and it makes sense, since we are compiling to web components. It definitely makes sense to allow the use of Shadow DOM, because that is a major part of web components, obviously.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the next topic is the VS Code extension, and there's a branch, a 2.0 branch. So what's the status on that?
So the status is, as with everything else, that it's been on hold for 2 weeks, but I actually started working on it again this morning. And a goal for the week, even if I don't have a lot of work days this week, but a goal is to actually ship it in some form so that people can start experimenting with it. I do want to get rid of a lot of bogus diagnostic errors and stuff, because it looks, if you have tag trees now, there are just diagnostics everywhere that...
Yeah, I totally get that. I tried running it. I was having issues the first time I tried running it, but it was just something simple as forgetting to run npm install. And when I got it running locally, it was showing me like warnings for requiring system modules like FS and PAT and stuff like that. So
Okay.
like a whole file was just filled up with warnings.
Yeah, exactly. So I have already like 3-4 different classes of warnings that I'm going to get rid of today. And I'm also going to look quickly into completions for tags, because that's one of the cool things we can do. So I just want to look at how difficult that will be to implement nicely. But I think the tooling is one of the main important points of the whole version 2 release. So I do think that we need to squash the remaining bugs in the language itself, but also make the tooling really nice before a public launch.
Yeah, that seems like it's going to delay things a lot. So I think it's a good idea to focus on tooling, but I don't know, like, how good does the tooling need to be first?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be exceptional. I agree about that, but it does need to at least work. In the sense that you don't want, again, as you saw, you don't want to your files filled with weird diagnostics and problems that aren't really problems. So
maybe you, if you do a release soon in the near future, maybe Eric and we could try to get some more people to test. I can definitely use it lots more. I only got to try it out on one or a couple of days last week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would definitely remove the barrier for testing if there was a release.
Yeah, it's true.
So another thing we also talked about is doing a live stream on the VS Code extension. So with regards to the timeline, do you think we could do here's a video walkthrough of the VS Code extension and this is what's new in February, or should we try to delay it for March?
I think February is a decent goal. Late February, I guess.
Nice. I'm just thinking, I want to mark this, but I don't want to open up my address book. So, okay, so maybe I can do this and then fix that later. Cool. So that's good, and I definitely look forward to the VS Code plugin being more stable. I didn't really get to try out the feature set because I was seeing a lot of logs, and I was just happy the syntax highlighting was working reliably.
Yep.
So, but the Sublime plugin, have you made a release with regards to the SFC stuff that someone was asking about?
I haven't, but I can actually push that now as we speak. I don't really remember how the update process works with the Sublime text plugins, but I think it's basically automatically. It just listens to the repository.
Oh, nice.
Let's see. So I did push support now, and then we can just see if it actually, maybe I need to tag it.
That's a repository on your account.
Yeah. Yeah, but I pushed it now, so we can check that later. But yeah, I will update the version.
Okay, cool. So the next thing is the walkthrough of the open issues. Do you want to switch to your monitor and run git speak?
Sure. Let me see. I think I need to add it. I'll publish the version later. Let me see. If you stop sharing them.
Stop sharing.
Share desktop 2. Can you see my screen now?
No. Let me go into full screen.
I need to put. Now you should.
Now I see it. Nice.
Yeah.
So should we just start at the top and go all the way down?
We could.
Or maybe if you think we could filter on V2 only specific things, if that's more productive.
Yeah, maybe we should just start from the top, and then when we get down to basically issues that are before V2, we might just skip them for now. But I think not all issues are tagged correctly, so it makes sense to start from the top.
Yeah.
So this is an issue you posted. I'm not really sure.
It's the thing is that it's basically error messages. That's the topic. So
yeah.
we have to do something about the error messages because it's really.
So was that with Imba rollup, or what was that with?
I think that was just with the Imba command, because I don't remember the details, but when you run the Imba command, it's doing something where it's trying to add Imba.
Yeah.
Requiring it to see common JS stuff.
But
and then,
is this for V2?
Yes,
because in general for V2 things are pretty broken now when running scripts directly through the Imba command. As we talked about previously, especially because we compile to ESM instead of CommonJS. So until we get CommonJS support, either by implementing it ourselves or including Babel or Rollup to do an additional transformation, then running Imba code directly through the Imba binary is pretty broken. So we need to consider how we want to support that. Either we could say that we just don't support that and you use rollup both for the client and for your server scripts, or we might need to just create a separate binary or package or something like TS node, which is for running TypeScript directly.
No, wait. Just like why can't we just keep the Imba binary, and then if the issue is dependencies, then we move that out of the repository. Like Imba doesn't produce the Imba binary, and then whatever produces the Imba binary does the rollup stuff. Like I personally don't care what's happening under the hood. I just want to run this command, and here's my script, and it should just run, and it should also give sensible error messages. So if it's easier to make a new command line tool, which is totally separate of the Imba core stuff, then I think that's better, because when you're deploying Imba and using it, you're not really using the Imba command directly unless you're running a script, right? You're using Webpack, or now people are going to use Rollup. So maybe the Imba command shouldn't be in the Imba repository, and it's a other project where other dependencies are included and stuff is smooth and so on.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion that we should also have. So I'm inclined. My opinion here is moving towards actually creating a kind of a mono repo and start adding some dependencies to Imba itself to make sure. I'm not sure if it makes sense to have people include both Imba and Imba rollup. This is just one of many cases, but I think it makes sense to include all the good defaults basically in a single package, especially because Imba will be updated rather frequently, and it's just pretty messy if you need to all the time push a new version of Imba rollup and Imba router or whatever, and then all of these need to re-up their dependencies on each other. And for
I definitely get the point, but I still think you can manage that with tooling, like the one project I showed you, which is called Lerna. So yes, you could have a monorepo, but you don't need to make it a bloated package.json file. You could have separate directories where the CLI tooling would be on a different path. It has its own package.json thing, and I think it's enough to provide people with either this is the official template, or here is a CLI tool. When you have that and then it runs, everything works.
Yeah, but again, that's the problem with having. I see the point of having a good template for people to start with, but the problem there is when we update. Let's say we update Imba rollup or something, and we update some default configs or whatever. It's difficult to make everyone who's using that default template to make sure they start to upgrade Imba rollup and upgrade Imba and I do agree that we could have a single package that is called Imba compiler or something that has 0 dependencies like before, which is just the compiler. But when it comes to the runtime, I think it actually makes sense to even include things like the official router and several different things like that inside of the core package, because it makes a lot of things much easier, both for beginners and for advanced users, I think. And since things are really depending on each other, it makes sense to, if we don't want to have different libraries, you use 2 different component libraries that use different versions of Imba and different versions of the Imba router. And there are so many pitfalls when we start to try to decouple something that is inherently coupled.
Yeah, I totally get the point, and I'm definitely not going to spend much time on the dependency argument. But with regards to a user standpoint, like if you're going to say to me that you're a friendly full stack language, I definitely expect CLI tooling and stuff like that to just work. So like running the Imba command on a script should just work. And you should also get you should have the same default. If you don't have the shebang, then something happens, or you get a really, really good error message. So that's actually the next issue, if we could move on to that one. Do you have any ideas on that?
I replied to that earlier this morning. So I did fix the Imba rollup version so that it outputs the same kind of error message that we did before, instead of this cryptic thing here. And I also implemented something I think you will appreciate, and that is if you run the template, like the Imba 2 hello world, if you run npm start, or essentially if you run Imba rollup in watch mode, where it also serves the exposes the application on localhost, it will now instead of failing the bundling, it will actually inject a HTML thing in the client that shows the error as well. So that it looks like crap because it's not styled at all or anything, but it will work as you showed me earlier with Nuxt or whatever it was.
Can you demonstrate that? Do you have the example running?
Maybe I can at least find an example. Let me see. Hello world. So if this is the hello world, if I do npm run start, it should exist here. I'm experimenting with some router stuff. So let me see. I'm going to, it's pretty messy, I think. Let me see if I remove, I'm just going to, hello. So it reloads as we talked about. So if I add something here, like a stray if without anything else, it should,
Nice. This is very cool.
It shows like this. I try to look into it. Would be very nice if you could link to like add a link in Chrome that actually opens in your editor.
Yeah, but what's it called? Nuxt has this open in editor. There's like a rounded rect button in the drawing.
But is that, do you need to install some dev tools for Chrome, or is it actually just a link that somehow magically works?
Oh, it just works, but I think Nuxt is they have a plugin they made, which they bundled together.
Okay.
I remember I was actually looking into that for some other project.
Mm-hmm.
I'll post the link.
Yeah,
but this is definitely nice. Like it doesn't have to be an overlay. It could be just like this. You want to see which line it is, and when you have split view, you have the code on one side and the browser. Bam, bam. You can experiment really fast.
Yeah,
I like it. Good job.
It's nice. So yeah, you would basically do it like this. So if we have, if I fix this now and just refresh or just save, then it will go back.
Yeah, so I tried using the Imba rollup tool, but I couldn't get it working. So I have to follow up on that.
Yeah.
But I tried cherry picking or selectively adding stuff into an existing project. I didn't start a new project. So that's, I don't know how we're gonna, like, is that an issue that we're gonna have in practice?
Do you talk about merging an Imba 1 and an Imba 2 project?
No, if you look at the Imba config now, you have an Imba config.json file.
Yeah.
So is this file gonna change during or until Imba is released? Most likely, yes.
Yeah, most likely, yes. Or at least we need to have a discussion about it and think about like what maybe we could have some same defaults where you don't even need a config at all. But yeah, we need to discuss it, obviously.
Yeah, so for the rollup stuff, you just need to install the rollup command, Imba rollup, and then you add this JSON file. That's the only thing you really need, if I understand it correctly.
It should be the only thing you really need. And then you should be able to run like Imba rollup in the directory, or add it as, if you add Imba rollup as a dependency, you should obviously add it as a script in the package JSON.
Yes.
So that this accesses. But I'm also, it would be kind of cool as well to just have a global Imba installation where you don't need to add Imba or Imba rollup or anything as dependencies of your project at all. Not sure how much sense it makes, but I just think, especially when talking to beginners, the whole package ecosystem in JavaScript and the various bundlers and packagers and all that is really, it's difficult to wrap your head around. And it would be cool if Imba has all these same defaults so that most people will not need to think about that at all.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I can spend hours talking about that. And also even like, even in the Nuxt and Vue world, you have a lot of details. So that's why I was asking about the configuration. So one thing that would be nice there is like to get a better understanding of, like, if you have this configuration, like when you add plugins, how does that look like with rollup and so on?
Yeah.
But we don't need to cover that now. That's something that I could also look at myself later.
Yeah.
But I still think the error messages suck. Like if you see here, like if we look at the error message you just showed, like where is it? Do you have it up?
Let's see. I can at least reproduce it.
Okay.
WebSocket. Did I turn?
You have to refresh maybe.
Oh, so this was some sort of weird error. I think I need to. There are some problems where it actually ends up crashing sometimes.
Oh, okay, yeah. So still, like unexpected post if.
Yeah.
I think we can do something with making these error messages like readable. Make them. So I don't know. I don't have any concrete ideas, but it would be nice to just like for a user, like if you get, this is most like if we have the post if, like we know there's an unexpected post if, we could turn that into a sensible error message, and then we could say, here's a common issue that's related to that. You forgot to complete your conditional statement or whatever.
Yeah.
Basically, here's the error message. We know most likely what it is, and here is the common scenarios where it happens, and then you would get that. So you could get the most relevant bits first, and then more description.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know how we could do that, but I think there's a really good opportunity to clean up the error messages now that 2.0 hasn't been released yet.
Yeah, I think so too.
So do you have any, you wrote something in the issue, but because right now what's happening is the compiler output is being exposed, right?
What do you mean?
Like when you get the error or the parsing error, so that's what's being exposed. Could we have an intermediate layer between the compiler error and this?
Yeah, we can definitely add just in the Imba parse error or whatever the class is, add a something that parses some of these, especially when it says unexpected and then a token type. That is an error that comes directly from JSON, which we use for the parsing. So it should be easy to detect some of these and just rewrite them to a more friendly thing. Definitely.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm interested in looking at.
Yeah.
Maybe we could come up with like some way we could map them like straightforward from here's the error code or the error description from the parsing.
Yeah.
And yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So next one, this is Imba.io, I think, but
yeah. So I found out that there is here's the undefined crap again from GitSpeak. Like I don't get that. It was fine when I posted it.
Yeah, it's weird.
Anyways, I think if we do your idea with the JS doc stuff, and if we enforce like a strict rule, all of the internal Imba code or the APIs is documented with the whatever we use, and that generates valid JS doc, then we can use this JS doc dash templating, and that should give us doc set. Like we can produce a doc set from the comments, and I think just that is going to be really powerful. And if you look, like you've used it yourself, so I'm not going to advertise that much for it.
Yeah.
But for me, I definitely want to like follow up on the JS doc comment stuff. So is that something that you think we're going to have for 2.0, or what's the status on that? Or
I think it might make sense to push that to 2.1 or something, just because there are so many things and we want to get the initial version out the door.
Yeah.
And I think I started 2 weeks ago, I started rewriting the Imba router to work with Imba 2. And in general, I see that we really do need to create some actual projects in Imba 2 because there are still stumbling blocks everywhere. The dream scenario would obviously be to migrate Scrimba and or GitSpeak over to Imba 2, but it will take a long time to make everything work. I did create, I'm not sure if you saw that, but I did create a 1.5.3 branch or 1.5x branch.
I didn't see that. What is new?
For Imba, where I essentially just added some extremely rudimentary rewriting where it automatically, as we talked about, like it adds explicit self and add parents for function calls and a few other things. So now it does produce broken Imba 2 code, but at least it produces code that is close to Imba 2. So I just created it quickly while I started rewriting the router because it was just such a hassle. Even in such a tiny project, it was a huge hassle to start to change the colons to dots and see, catch all these minor differences. So we can get back to the status of that later, but
yeah, that sounds good. I'm eyeballing it now.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can get back to that. So this is deferred. The next thing.
This one is actually fixed this morning. I'll deploy new alpha later today. I'll close it when we actually add the new.
That sounds good.
New version.
So this is a draft. Should we skip the drafts?
Yeah,
or?
we can skip. Yeah, we can skip the drafts. So this is actually interesting. I thought about this also today. So I do agree. You talked that like you mentioned, who really cares what the default is?
Yeah, I did, and
For
I
me,
still don't care.
No, you still don't care. But if you don't care, would you mind that we just enforce tabs? Because the problem here is that if we enforce one of the styles, that makes it much easier to just really give consistent good error messages when you are using the wrong type of indentation. It allows us to really highlight the wrong type of indentation in the language like theme, or the syntax highlighting. And I think the main pain point, the reason I wrote this, is that it is a pain for me when I copy Imba code from somewhere else, and sometimes it's tabs, sometimes it's spaces, sometimes it is spaces, but I have configured my editor to use tabs for Imba files, and it's just a huge mess. So if I know that it is easy for basically every editor to set the default to tabs or spaces for a specific type of file, obviously, and include an editor config file in the app template. So would it be a problem to just enforce tabs, just to make sure that everyone always use tabs?
No, for me it wouldn't be a problem, and like as long as you have a tool which does the right thing, that can read your code and then re-indent it, and I think that's more than enough. And also in the cases where it doesn't know what to do, just make it obvious, and then that should be fine, right? So if you always get, it tells you exactly this is what's supported, and you're not doing that. Currently, with the current state, we have inconsistent indentation, and like when you read that, you don't really know what it means. So you have to think, and then you have to figure out, okay, which line is it? And you look at the error message, and then it tells you it's that line, but maybe it's not just that line. It could be multiple lines.
Yeah.
It could be several other lines, and so it's definitely a time sink.
Yeah, and you kind of like Go, don't you? The language Go?
I don't like the language Go, but I've programmed a lot in the language Go. But I like some of their design decisions, and one thing they did really well, in my opinion, is the Go formatting or format tool. And basically what they did there is like, this is the way Go code should look like.
Yeah.
Like there's no, like, here's the tool for it, and if you use it, that's the default you get, right? You just run it. You have like the two modes you really care about. One is just do nothing, just go through the code and write it out to standard output, and the other one is replace in place. So overwrite my source code with your formatting style, and that's definitely sensible, and I think many people are using it. And when I was programming in Go, I had that on command save. So when I hit command save in the Go file, it would just run the formatter, and everything would look consistent.
Yeah. But I think Go is one of the very few languages that actually enforce tabs for indentation, if I remember correctly.
So, but there's a tool. There's an official tool.
I know there's a tool, but I think even without the tool, Go code without tabs for indentation wouldn't even run, would it? or maybe it would. But yeah, so if Imba is supposed to be kind of an opinionated language, I guess, and my opinion has always been clear that I do think tabs are better. That's obviously a huge discussion, but my main point is that it allows me and you to use different indentation levels without issue.
Yeah, so for me, like I'm just going to repeat it. So it doesn't really matter what we pick, as long as you have a tool.
Yeah.
Or if we don't have a tool, like the error message should be super clear on what's wrong. It should tell you like, this is the problem. And then you know, okay, I have to make sure the whole file that uses this style, and then you have to do it manually, unfortunately, if there's no tool. So the best ideal situation would be there's a tool which just does it. So you can go from whatever if we change it.
But then you would also agree that it is perfectly fine if that tool always defaults to, let's say, tabs, so that you can't configure the tool to use spaces instead or anything like that.
I don't know what Go formatting, the formatting tool does with the options, but I wouldn't support it. I wouldn't even bother. Yeah, I would definitely just have, this is the default. And then if you use something else, you use something else.
Yeah. Cool. Should we move? So that's, I can write a comment on this as well for just recap of what we discussed. But I'm inclined to then remove support for using spaces for indentation. That will, even before we have the tooling, it will make error messages much more consistent, and it will make it easy to really highlight when you use the wrong kind of indentation. So
yeah, I think it sounds good. Like if there's no way of getting to the mismatch indentation error message, I think that's great, because it's a very unnecessary error message.
Yes, I agree.
Nice.
Cool. Syntax for decorators. We still haven't gotten a lot further on this one. I actually kind of liked this example, or using, I like that as well. But I did like the at and then parentheses. So I'm not sure, maybe we discussed that somewhere else.
The screenshots, maybe. Try looking at the screenshots.
Yeah.
Was it this?
Yeah. I kind of liked that one. But again, right now it's just using double ats. And we don't need to decide this right now, but it's good to keep the discussion going. So we can maybe get back to that next in the next bi-weekly meetup.
Yeah, but it's definitely needed for as far as I understood, for rewriting parts of Scrimba and GitSpeak.
Yeah, it is.
So okay. But
again, it's not like even we definitely should land this before we publish 2.0. But it's not that big of a deal to change the syntax either. If we start rewriting something now, then there aren't that many places you need to rewrite if we decide to change the syntax form.
Yeah, I see.
But so we already, basically it's not documented, like no parts of V2 are really documented now, but you can define fields now without the syntax in front. I think we had a short discussion about that, and I'm just not certain what looks best, but this was already supported now without the,
Nice.
Current status, this is just a recap of that. I already started this in the other branch, so maybe we should just add a comment to refer to that other branch. This one is kind of interesting. Not sure if you noticed, but when you did create a custom tag in Imba 2, let's say you have this app page or any kind of custom tag, and you use it, then since it's a web component, it will, the initial styling of it will be display initial or display unset or whatever it is, which makes it really weird. Like usually you do expect the styling to be display block or display inline or something. So I'm just wondering if we should somehow hack and make that the default. So every custom tag defined via Imba will have a default display style.
But you can overwrite it with your own style.
Yeah, you can, but it feels kind of weird to always have to like, not even scope, but always app page, app something.
I like it.
Display block. I don't like that when something like this should really be the default. I don't necessarily like that.
Yeah, but like if you use web components today, so that's the default. Block is the default, or is it inline?
No, that's the problem. Block is not the default. Inline is not the default either.
Yeah,
I
so
think
it's
unset or initial is the default.
Yeah.
And that makes for pretty weird styling out of the box.
Yeah, that's what I like that. Then you're forced to use CSS scoped immediately after. So
I think that's just verbose and repeating yourself without much yeah.
But I don't really see a big issue with it. So if you have like if you don't like the default, you can always override it. So if you set the default, there's no you can easily override it. So there's really no issue with changing it to display block or whatever makes sense.
Yeah. Are you now talking about adding a default or making people always write this?
No, I'm talking about if you change the default behavior.
Yeah.
Or we don't change it.
People can still override it.
So it doesn't really.
Yeah. It's pretty just while we did have the top, we talked about at the start of the meeting, just more contributors. And it's really cool that you got the Nathan, is that his name? To start rewriting the material Imba library to Imba 2. Because that's already exposed a lot of bugs and weird edge cases with slots and custom elements.
Nice,
so
it's really good.
Many of them are already fixed, but yeah, it's good to actually battle test the new version.
And also, if you could review his code, that would also be, I think, amazing for him. So I think he asked about it on Gitter.
Yeah, I saw
so that would be
that was
great.
When I was sick, so I will get back to that now. Syntax for slots, it's a draft without the description, essentially. I do think we need to discuss that more because the way we use slots now is not ideal, especially since we actually hog the native slots stuff. So now you will not ever be able to create an actual native slot element, etc. in Imba. And I think it's kind of verbose. So it makes sense to explore a few different syntaxes for slots. The slot proposal for the V1 branch had a custom slot syntax that I think made kind of sense. So yeah. Mascot, I don't think much has happened with that lately.
No, the only... Sorry, you were saying?
No, I'm starting to kind of like the approach from Eric Tirado, especially with the friendly full stack language tagline. I kind of do like the cozy kind of mascot. I think there was a few more screenshots there.
Imba chicks.
Yeah. So what, do you have any input on this now, or?
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking was from a marketing standpoint is if we can get the web components logo somewhere in there, that would be great.
Yeah.
So if that's like an emblem on the chest or whatever it is, similar to what's done above with the blue thing there, you can see. So
yeah.
If we add that on the chicken, then I think that's going to be good because then we
Yeah.
can see the web component connection.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and yeah, other than that, I don't think. I think the slogan is good. It's definitely, as mentioned before, a really high bar. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that has to be done on the tooling.
Yeah. I think I can just remove. Yeah, that's just some internal stuff. This one is, I haven't gotten around to it. I do think we should add support for comments, like native tag comments. It makes sense a few places. I'm not sure yet if we should just have automatic interpolation inside of the comment, but yeah.
Just it's a side topic, but with regards to the, so one thing I was thinking about is, you know, when you have JavaScript code in Imba code, right?
Yeah.
And let's say you're using, you have a chunk of JavaScript code, and then somewhere in there you're using braces, and yeah, maybe we should take that as a separate topic.
But what about, what do you mean with inline JavaScript code? Like the backticks where you actually, it just gets code?
Normally I would use the 3 lines, like no, the 3 quotation marks, because that worked for me if I remember correctly. And then I've had like the syntax highlighting really gets messed up. Like it totally breaks the whole file. But I think maybe it's better. I'll follow up on that as a separate topic.
I guess so. Yeah, this is another issue I will actually write up and post. I have some ideas for letting our type of decorators have some additional features compared to JavaScript, where you don't need to always import the decorators. But that's yeah, I'll get back to that later. Now we're getting on to older issues that I don't think.
Can you filter away imba.io with the filter on the left side?
Yeah, I can do that as well. So document the new test suite. That is, I guess, my job. Still haven't done that.
Yeah, so I tried running the test suite, and like it's super slow. Like I thought maybe I was messing up something, but it takes like forever. Like,
yeah, maybe you're. So for me, it takes usually 4 seconds. But I'm not sure if you have seen recently. So at least it is slightly better than before, because it is now showing you progress along the way. If I run the test now, it will actually start showing.
Nice.
Things happening.
Yeah.
But the reason it's kind of slow is that it runs everything at the same time, because it's using Puppeteer, so the headless Chrome, and it's running it concurrently. So it's running it's basically spawning pages for all the files of the test suite at once, and it doesn't log out anything before everything is finished, because all the pages will obviously log out results at the same time, like mixed, not in order. But if you run it not concurrently, then you can see that how it walks through the files. But then it takes even longer time, so it does make sense to.
Yeah, but you could actually run it. You could run it as separate jobs synchronously. So if you spin all of the jobs up separately, and then you just wait for the jobs to complete, and they're still running. The only downside you have with that is that then you're going to see different lines for different tasks. So you're going to get a mix.
But that is essentially what we're doing now, because nothing is run in our script. Everything is run asynchronously. You can look at all the pages that are created, page objects that are created in Puppeteer as separate processes.
No,
So
Yeah.
we wouldn't get any speed up by running them in actual different processes.
No, yeah, most likely not. But now
Yeah.
it took like 20 seconds to run, right? If I see it
Yeah.
correctly from here.
And that's because it just, so it does a lot of things though. One of the things it is actually compiling everything in every test. It is compiling the example inside of Puppeteer. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to like be always up to date based on the latest version of the compiler, and didn't want to have yet another script that needs to run at the same time as the tests. We could probably speed it up a little, but I don't think, as long as you get some progress indication along the way, I don't think it's that big of a deal. So now it is faster than, but again, I'm probably on a relatively fast Mac, so it would be interesting to see how long it takes for you now.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to run time on it, but it seems to be faster now than earlier.
Yeah. Should we go through more now, or I think most we are now getting back to V1 stuff. Sample applications, slots to inherit, we see. This is part of some, we should discuss slots more. I like actually some of the ideas and I see the reasons for them, but it is kind of difficult to implement. I'm trying to think about how we would do that. One of the reasons it is difficult is that we are using slots the same way as Svelte, I guess. So you can essentially, now you can have multiple, let's say we have like app component. Inside of here, you can have div, slot, test, blah, blah. Then you can have multiple elements that go to the same slot, which so that like you get all of these elements with the slot test are then rendered inside of the slot with the name test. And when you support that kind of behavior, then it is difficult to say that like this element here should represent the actual slot element inside of the component.
Yeah, I see.
So unless if we move away from that and say that you will only be able to have like a single slot, a single element for a specific slot, then it would be easier to implement something like Eric.
But if we look at if you go back to the pull request on GitSpeak, so
which pull request?
The one with slots. So there should be one. This one, is it closed?
Maybe I should use the fancier. Yeah, it is closed.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I closed it because it's obviously like it is completely different than the way we have implemented things now, and yeah.
Nice, like so many weeks later. It's cool that it's closed. But I was thinking, could you maybe try to solicit feedback from this person? Or wait, so are you looking at the issue or the pull? I'm just not sure.
I think I'm looking at the no, this is a proposal. Yeah.
Yeah, where's the pull request?
I guess this is the pull request.
Yeah, this is the pull request. So maybe you could try to reach out to Atif here and see if he has thoughts.
Yeah.
And then, or maybe even get him to play around with the current Imba 2 implementation and then give feedback. Because then maybe he has some valuable feedback, and also it would be nice to make sure that he is getting back to Imba stuff. He is working on the Start Imba project, which is cool. So I'm hoping he's going to update that for Imba 2. Maybe this will motivate him to do that as well.
Yeah. But did we land anything about the whole monorepo discussion? Like I'm itching to move Imba rollup into the Imba project, and so that we have a single Imba version that is updated.
What do you want to move? I didn't get that, sorry.
I essentially want to move the whole Imba rollup. That depends on rollup and a bunch of other things, and move that into the main Imba repository and the main Imba package, so that Kind of like Imba, Imba C, the binary for compiling Imba files now, doesn't really make sense since you do need to bundle things anyway, even for Node. So I do think it makes sense to make that behave more like if you install TypeScript and you run TSC, then that will compile and use a TypeScript config file and stuff. And I think that makes sense for Imba as well.
Yeah, but the behavior you're talking about is not the same as the TypeScript stuff.
No, but it's the same in the sense that the compiler, the binary for compiling that is shipped with the language packet should be enough to actually run things, I think.
Yeah, but in the wait, so did you say TS node or are you talking about just...
No, I'm talking about TSC.
Yeah, TSC can't run code. It just compiles, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I agree. But
yeah.
At least it compiles to code that can run.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But Imba C essentially doesn't do that even. You always need to use Webpack or Rollup or something.
Yeah, yeah. Then I get what you're talking about. So basically, you want to produce output reliably that can run always.
Yeah. And so in a perfect world, if it didn't even matter at all if you had dependencies or not. So I've been clinging to the concept of Imba having 0 dependencies because I like the idea. I like that it's really lightweight. But I still see that every project going forward will essentially need dependencies anyway. So people are just downloading them in a separate package.
Yeah, but like I don't think it's the same thing. Like I definitely think it's nice when you're using a project that it covers its own use case.
Yeah.
But doesn't enforce any dependencies on you that you don't really need. So if you now are going to use Imba in this new way you're describing it, then you're going to be forced to use rollup. And like as soon as you add the
you're
Imba,
not necessarily going to be enforced to use rollup, but you are.
Sorry.
So the default should be to make people use rollup. Because rollup is just an implementation detail, essentially.
Yeah,
it would basically be more like you don't even think about it. It shouldn't be called Imba rollup. It should just be called Imba C or whatever.
Yeah, but you're talking about adding it to the main package. So as soon as you add Imba, you're adding rollup, right?
Yeah, but that's
you can't
just
choose
behind the scenes. There's no reason for you to not include. So Imba has been extreme in the sense that it has 0 dependencies. But if you look at basically every package in the JavaScript ecosystem, it has way too many dependencies.
I think there is value in keeping it the way it is currently. I think the idea with the mono repo is good. I like that part, but I don't like the other, like the direction you're taking it in. Like if you have a mono repo, you can use tooling like Larna, which I showed you before, and it works. And I still think it's a very good idea to separate the package JSON files and have the slimmed down. I think there's a lot of like interesting things that can be done on the command line, but I think that can be a separate package. It doesn't have to be in the main Imba package. I think that could be a small, this is a very pure package and it's different. Like when you include it, it's minimal. It doesn't have all of the crap and it just has the stuff you need.
But then I do think that we should flip it around and say that that minimal package is not the package that is called Imba. That package is called Imba compiler or something equivalent to that. And that the main Imba package basically includes, it's transparent for you if you don't use it, but it should include a lot of the things that makes things just magically work so that people don't need to even, yes, we should have an app template as well.
I still think maybe it's nice to keep that one just Imba and then call the other stuff Imba-CLI or Imba.
Yeah, but I'm not just talking about CLI. I'm talking about things like Imba router, just a concept like that.
Yeah, so, that could be part of the template, right? Like the
it couldn't be part of the template because that's the thing that to make it really work well, as we talked about, to make sure we update it and keep it consistent with the language and continually improve it. I think it makes a lot of sense to have, if it is an official router that should just work magically, it is just a huge hassle to update that independently from Imba and vice versa. So yeah, we definitely need to discuss it further. I think it's a good thing that you are pushing back and that we should have a real discussion about it. But to me, especially when we want to be the friendly full stack language, it makes sense for me to think that we should be opinionated, in the sense that we should kind of allow ourselves to choose for people what kind of bundler or packager they're going to use and things like that.
Yeah, but yeah, sorry.
And we should also make it super friendly to get started with it.
I think that's like what you're talking about is tooling, and I'm thinking specifically about the command line tooling, and I really like the approach Vue has done with regards to the specifically that here's a Vue CLI package you install, and then you get a lot of fancy stuff with the terminal and also the web server which spins up.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but what I'm worried about is the Meteor situation type thing, where I haven't used Meteor really at all, but I've tried setting up a Meteor project just once. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, like it took a while. There's a lot of dependencies that were being downloaded, and like I was just seeing the download
but
progress
I think
bar.
Meteor is an exceptional example, especially because it has tons and tons of dependencies, and because it was created before the whole NPM ecosystem really took off. So it uses kind of a really weird mix of NPM, and I know they fixed this in later versions, but at least when I used it a lot, I used it with Imba, actually, created quite a big project with it. So nice. I totally agree that setting there was a nightmare. But I think it's easier to make sure everything works nicely together if you have it as a single package that you upgrade whenever there is something to upgrade. I do agree that we could separate the more advanced CLI tools out of Imba, but then we should at least have really good defaults where if you try to run some of the commands and they are missing, like you haven't installed the CLI tools, then it should just show you the single commands to install it. And yeah.
So yeah, I think it's interesting, and I get the arguments, but it's definitely an issue in the JavaScript ecosystem that you have too many dependencies in a project, and it's also an issue where you have like lots of small dependencies, and one is upgraded, there's a fix there, you need to update it, and bumping with frameworks where you get a lot of dependencies. So I definitely see that pain point. I've experienced it a lot. And I think maybe it makes sense to discuss this with more people, if you haven't already done it.
I discussed it with a few people, and I think especially someone like Eric kind of agrees with me. He's what he would consider a beginner. And he, as many others, thinks that the whole getting started with JavaScript applications today is a huge pain. A lot of that has to do with the whole packaging stuff and bundlers. And so how do you support something like Sass? So we could just create some config files showing how you use it with Webpack and how you use it with Rollup and various things. But we could also say that we are in a position where we are going to stake out the future of web development, essentially. And especially when we are a friendly full stack language, we should consider, do we want people to, do we want to allow people to use Sass? If we really want to allow that, then we should probably include some same defaults for that in Imba config or our build process, so that it just works out of the box. Think like Parcel.
Yeah, but I'm more fan of the opinionated direction where you say like Sass is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Here is the new CSS features. Here is the amazing stuff you can do with vanilla CSS. That's why I really like this the comment blocks. I think it's really cool. It's vanilla CSS you put in there. So I would try to reduce the dependencies where it makes sense, and just not add them at all. Like I know Eric uses the Sass stuff, and in the Scrimba code base and GitSpeak we use a lot of less, which is unfortunate, I think. It would be nice if we use just vanilla CSS, and I think definitely that's what we should promote.
Yeah. Now that CSS has come that far, and especially since we already don't support older browsers for other reasons, we can really embrace the new and nice features of CSS.
So that's, but I still think the main project, if this is supported, like this is the way, how do you do this other less popular things? I don't know how that looks like, but maybe we could do some plugin thing, or just if you care about this, then here's a way to plug into that. And then if we have this minimal, I don't know if it's in the roll-up stuff or somewhere else, but if we could just provide a way for people to figure this out on their own and then do it, I think that's enough. Because if Eric really cares about Sass support, or if we really care about less support, we can add that as a separate thing, and it's totally outside of the project scope.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree that we should have a package. We don't need to decide on what it should be called now, if that should be the Imba package or the Imba compiler or something like that. But I do agree that there should be a lightweight package that you can include directly in projects if you somehow want to tweak a Webpack config to use Webpack, or just use it to create a playground for Imba or anything like that.
Definitely for playground. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to be the final end, but like the other proposal you had with maybe I misunderstood you initially, like with the renaming the compiler stuff to this minimal package. And changing the main Imba package to something bigger, that doesn't really matter. Like I think that's also a good compromise, because the people who are interested in just the Imba bits they control, they can get the compiler package without requiring all of this other stuff. And since it's one package, it should be easier for the Imba project. And since Imba is bundling everything together in that approach, that shouldn't be too hard to maintain, and it could be done in the mono repo. I think that would also work in practice.
And it would be really nice to sit down with you and come up with the structure of the mono repo using Lerna. And
it's a very nice tool, very easy to use. I definitely recommend it. It makes it so much easier, at least if you have multiple package JSONs in the same repository. So
doesn't Lerna itself have an incredible amount of dependencies? I just remember that it was so slow to install.
Yeah, but you install this globally. You don't add it as a dependency to Imba.
I know.
So,
what do you think about that? Just to play around with the thought. What do you think about the idea of like encouraging people to install Imba as a global dependency? If you are in a world where we can make sure the Imba command runs things nicely through Node and whatever you would expect.
Yeah, so if you follow the approach you mentioned, or one of them, that one, I think, then yes, then it makes sense to ask people to install Imba globally, because you have one command, right? This is the official command line tool. It's no longer command line tool and Imba runtime, it's the command line tool for Imba. And maybe it would also make sense to smash the compiler into, like, the Imba C command also into the Imba command, so that it's just a flag or an option. I think then definitely makes sense to say, hey, you install Imba with npm install -g. And also maybe we could even discuss with like, should we have a command line argument for just starting a new project, hitting Imba new, and then it will also spin up. It would create the directory structure or clone the repository and just rename some files, whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it would make sense, because then you run the Imba command.
Yeah.
But wait. So Imba command is global. So when you run when you run npm build in the project, you're using are you using Imba then, or what are you using?
So that's the question. If you so the obvious challenge with this approach would be conflicting versions of Imba, where like maybe one project is stuck on 2.1.1 and another project wants to update to 2.1.2. That is easily a problem, but
but I think we could solve that if we rely on the Imba config file you created, and we assume that we know where you currently are. So if we say you're on version X, and the version is hard-coded into the JSON file, and whenever you run Imba, it should detect the version, and then it could tell you, hey, you're running a mismatch version. Here are the things that change between the language. And then you could run migrate. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. And we already do some of this with Imba rollup now. It essentially, when you run Imba rollup, it checks the Imba version that is resolved for Imba rollup, and it also checks the Imba version resolved for the project you are trying to run Imba rollup for. And if these two are of different versions, it will log out that there are two different Imba versions potentially here. But especially when you start, if you start having an ecosystem of different Imba applications, it is starting to make a lot of sense to try to make sure everyone is just running, everything is always compiled with the latest version of Imba. We never want the case where I am creating an Imba application and I'm using your data layer or your a custom component that you have created and a custom router that you created. We definitely want to be in a position where these various components of the applications really depend on different versions of Imba, because then we're fucked already. So we do want, ideally, we want the approach where you are always essentially trying to be on the bleeding edge of Imba.
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea to be on the latest version because of stability and so on. But the problem you have in real world usage is that there's a API breakage or there's some syntax changes, and it's just like a painful process to upgrade. So I think if we build on the migrate command you added, and if it understands the Imba configuration and it can figure out, hey, you are running on this version and I'm on this version. And if it figures out there's no syntax changes, it just bumps the version on all of the dependencies that are in the package JSON for you. You don't have to think about anything, at least the ones which we generated, right?
Yeah.
And then I think it's fine, because if you make the update process like smooth, then there's no issue encouraging and telling people, hey, run the latest and greatest. But if it's painful and if my app becomes unstable because I'm updating, then then it's not so cool to be running on the latest version every week or every month or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think there should be a migrate. If you want people to run on the latest version, there should be a really nice path, or it doesn't have to be nice, at least the easy one. It shouldn't be so hard to update.
Yeah, I agree. So we can probably, we will definitely discuss this further and get back to it in the next meeting.
Yeah.
So maybe we should, I also need to publish a few of these drafts because some of them are important things that need to get done for version 2.
We should definitely start wrapping up. So the last topic is the document formatter tool. I eyeballed the migrate stuff.
Yeah.
And it looks good. So
Yeah.
that's cool, and it's
But
definitely going to save time.
and I already see that just from the simple example of converting the router. I see that if we are planning to essentially migrate the whole Scrimba code base, especially the editor and everything there, we will probably need a more advanced type of migrator that even runs the code, where you can compile the code in sort of a pseudo mode where it does a lot of additional checks, runtime checks, where whenever you try to call a function, it looks, oh, was this defined as a property, this and that, and then logs out hints for you, because there are so many concepts that has changed that unfortunately it is difficult to convert a huge code
Yeah,
base.
so what do you think? Should we schedule a separate meeting on this or not? It seems like you have already started, so that this is a good start.
Yeah, it is a good start. We should, I will continue rewriting the Imba router and just note the stumbling blocks I encounter. But yeah, we should, not sure we need to, we don't need to schedule anything right now, but since we are working at the same place, we should at some point sit down and just talk about and look into the challenges of converting the actual projects and then see how we can make that easier.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks.
Thank you. Talk to you later.